Okay, so Revo Fitness are on board with the Pies Nation podcast. And look, I'll be honest, when I heard it was $9.69 a week, I had some questions, particularly with no lock-in contracts, but there's no catch. Full gym, everything you need, free weights, pin and plate, cardio, functional training, and it's open 24/7 with no dodgy fine print. Who's a Collingwood player that would be an absolute gym nut at Revo that would always be there 24/7?
Well, I think it's Billy Frampton, Nico. Obviously, a lot of noise out of the club that he's the bench press king, so I think he'd been there a fair bit.
Now, for $3 more a week, you can get unlimited Pilates, massage chairs, and the eVolt body scans thrown in, which I definitely need to look into. But Pilates, massage chairs, anyone ring a bell from the Collingwood Footy Club that might utilise some of that?
I think you might find Geordie to go in a massage chair, Nico. Just taking things easy, 24/7, enjoying life.
Clubs are already all over Australia, so chances are there's one near you. Check it out at revofitness.com.au or sign up in Club Revo Fitness. Genuinely good value. I wouldn't lie to you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. My name is Nicholas Sacco, your host. Once again, this is episode 16 of season 8, or episode 217 if you're counting from the beginning. Unfortunately, it was more of the same from the Pies on Monday, who were in for the fight but could not finish the job, going down to Melbourne by 8 points on King's birthday, leaving us outside the top 10 heading into the bye and leaving us wondering if there's some triggers we need to pull in order to salvage the 2026 season. Today, we discussed the key moments in our defeat to the Dees, how things stand as we head towards the bye, get the latest voice memos from the fans thanks to SpeakPie, and get all the latest from our VFL and VFLW sides. As I welcome Marcus Callahan and Jack Dugan for our Tuesday afternoon record, the day after. I'm usually in a very good mood after King's birthday because more often than not, we've come away with a victory. It was not to be yesterday, and now the magnifying glass has really been put on the club as to what happens next, because there's a lot more questions and answers that have come out of Monday.
Nick, Jack, we've been waiting for this day for a while. Where do we actually stand in season 2026? And I think we can officially say it, boys, we are no good. It stings, but I'm actually glad we've lost the 2 weeks for reasons we will discuss today. We've discussed in the previous weeks and we'll continue to discuss over the course of this season. But I digress. Yesterday was a wonderful spectacle. Had to centre-half pinted, unfortunately. But gee whiz, Fox did a great production and showed really as many blue beanies, I think, as they could throughout the entire coverage, and made it known that this was one of the greatest days in football for a man who should be remembered for a long time in Neil Danaher. Thought the way it was put on across the whole round of footy was exceptional. A lot of close games, and ours was certainly the grandstand finish for the week. We're going to be very frustrated today, I think, boys. It's safe to say there's a lot of gripes, and this will be a bit of a therapy sesh. But Jack, how did you feel about the day? Did they get it right? And despite the result, first impressions of the game?
Yeah, look, I think walking away from that ground, Nico and Marcus, it was an overwhelming sense of frustration and anger, but really a day removed. It's probably a game that sums up our season so far in season 2026. I mean, still hold on to a little bit of hope that we can salvage something from this year. What that looks like, I'm still not too sure. But as Marcus just touched on just then, a day that really does feel a lot bigger than a game of footy. And the first one without the great Neil Danaher, and thought, the sliders as per, and everything leading into the game was almost perfection. The day that we got yesterday was great. Real finals-like feel about it when you get 80,000 to the G, and the sun's out. So everything apart from the footy was just amazing. And hats off to the AFL, hats off to all those involved at the MND Foundation, and especially the Danaher family. The turmoil that they're going through at the moment, to still show up on a day like that for Neil and for so many others around the country battling that insidious disease. Couldn't speak more highly of them. But overall, relating back to the footy, very frustrated, very angry coming into the studio today, Nico.
Yes, we've got a lot to discuss, that is for sure. To answer your question, Marcus, I think they did get it right, the whole spectacle, and the way they were able to present the legacy that Neil had left. Absolutely loved Daisy Thomas's Mick Malthouse dress up and getting Nick Maxwell out as well to lift the Premiership Cup. That was our only win for the afternoon, but boy, it was a nice little feeling to see those two up on the stage. But yes, really well done. The AFL do it better than anyone in terms of getting a community together for such a cause. And yes, let's hope we don't have to do too many more of these because we've found the cure. That has always been my hope, and I'm looking forward to that day.
Well, on that note, with a $40 million donation from a very wealthy couple up there in Queensland, I can't quite remember the names, but they need to be shouted out because, I mean, to say you're going to the game with a $10 million donation is already exceptional, and then to quadruple that because of the spectacle, my understanding is they were so swept up in the emotion and how well it was all put together. That is incredible and really a shift in probably not just the community around the MND and trying to improve the research and awareness, but probably setting a new standard for those sorts of things that can arise from when the AFL gets it right with a cause such as MND.
And good of Collingwood as well to allow Jai Arrow in as well to the club this week to toss the coin, but I believe he was in and around the club throughout the week, and it's always nice. There's so much talk throughout the year and over the years about the AFL versus NRL thing, and it was again one of these nice things that comes out of something that's so horrible as the two codes colliding and doing something for a good reason.
Absolutely. All right. Well, a lot of things caught our eye, that is for sure, and we've just mentioned a lot of the wonderful things that caught our eye, but unfortunately there weren't many other things that caught our eye in a positive light. And Marcus, I'm going to start with you as we do with the pie that caught our eye from Monday.
Yeah, pie that caught my eye this week is Braden Maynard, and talk about a guy who was personifying what this game was about in terms of just going absolutely hell for leather and really bringing an Anzac Day type ferocity to this contest. There's obviously history there with Braz and the Melbourne faithful, and geez, they still remember. And you know what? Fair enough. If I was in their shoes, I'd probably do the same thing, losing a favourite son. But Brazzy, shoulder comes out, already had been throwing his weight around, leading from the front, and then the second moment that caught my eye was when Keziah Pickett elected to trip him mid-air and the shoulder popped out again. And to see a bloke running off the field with his shoulder popped out for a second time, obviously he's dislocated his shoulder. Many times he's had shoulder surgeries. He's used to these things happening in games. But I just died inside when he had to come off the field because he was the one for me that was absolutely... Nick was incredible in that first quarter with that ridiculous goal, but Brazzy was just absolutely leading from the front. And talk about guys going down. You just don't need to go down. Look, it's just devastating to think that he could miss the rest of the season, depending on what our imperatives are to get him back. I know he'll think he's probably coming back in the next 2 weeks. A few shoulder exercises and Braz will be back on the field, Jack. But yeah, what did it mean to you to see him go down?
Heartbreaking, mate, to say at the least. And as you touched on there, there's so much theatre since that final that we played against them between Melbourne and Braden Maynard, and it's always a watch. And to lose such a spiritual leader, obviously he's a co-captain at the moment with Darcy Moore out, but to lose such a spiritual leader so early in the game, to watch him come back on, and it really didn't seem like he'd lost a beat for the large part of it.
Jab.
Didn't hold back. It's not like we saw a different Braden.
It was crazier.
Braden Maynard when he came back out. And then, look, I went off a little bit off there, but I'm really disappointed to recently find out that Cozzy Pickett gets really a slap on the wrist, not even for that act. We talk about how much noise there was made after that final with the Brayshaw incident. Was he smothering? Was he bumping? All this stuff. To deliberately trip someone up, and yes, look, it's not Cozzy's fault really that he's broken his shoulder. I'm not blaming Cozzy Pickett for that, but that is not a football act whatsoever. No. We do not want to see that in our game, and I think he's got off extremely lightly. And I just asked the question before we were on air, if that was Braden Maynard tripping up Cozzy Pickett, I just wonder if there would have been a little bit of a different treatment, not just from the MRO, but from indeed the AFL community, not taking anything away from Cozzy's game yesterday, which was absolutely amazing, and we might get to that a little bit later. But yeah, did you want to touch on?
If it was Harvey Langford who did it, he may well be looking at a 1 week ban, because I'm convinced forever and a day the AFL, the MRO, they will adjudicate potential sanctions depending on the calibre of the player differently. And ever since Cochin got off in that grand final with that bump on Shield, all those years ago, the
Oh, yes.
prelim against the
prelim,
Giants
yep.
back in the day. I'm convinced that it's a thing. So a little bit skeptical there, but yeah,
So
Cozzy is a Brownlow potential. So you never know how these things work, Nico.
Sets the precedent, unfortunately, and that's just not what we
doesn't
want to
set
see.
it.
No, well, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't set the precedent at all. You're right, and the consistency is just thrown out the window. He's warming up. I like it.
The anger doesn't come from, I want to echo the point, the anger doesn't come from Braden Maynard injuring himself, right? It's the act of deliberately lifting your legs up to stop someone from getting
exactly
to the
what
next
he was
play.
doing.
It looks filthy. It looks disgraceful. If you've got young kids watching the game of footy on the weekend, to look at a star player of the game and who's meant to be, a leader of the game, given, his status within the AFL, given how much of a high quality player he is, there'll be young kids going to the footy who admire the hell out of Cozzy Pickett. And then for him to go and do that, you don't want to go see that at the local levels or think that that's okay. And that was an opportunity missed, I felt, from the AFL to really, say that that's not okay. We don't want to see that in our game. But, once again, the Stars get different treatment, and maybe we've been on the better end of that as well with Maynard all those years ago. However, I digress. The pie that caught my eye, Nico, before I spend the rest of this pod being a sad sack of I'm going to try and stay positive. Ed Allen was the pie that caught my eye this week. Breakout game, it has to be said for him. It's been coming for a little while now. We've spoken a lot on the pod about, is it going to go one way or the other? Is he going to really burst on to the scene, or is he going to sort of wilt away and be another, Finn McRae, Callum Brown, Tyler Brown type player that sort of too good for twos, not quite good enough for ones. But I thought it's amazing how well players can go when they are played in their position, and was given a fair chunk of run through the middle of the ground all day, was given the job on Cozzy Pickett when it looked early like he was going to get away from us. And I think despite Cozzy still having an amazing game, I mean, I was watching him quite closely throughout that game, and you only have to drop your concentration for half a second and Cozzy is off to the races, both ends of the ground. He's just a freak, and I thought Ed Allen actually did a really good job at quashing his influence for a small
contest,
period of that game. So really, really happy with that effort. And then conversely, I thought, when we were getting the ball in our hands, he was really clean. There was times where, we were saying in game to mates that I was going to the footy with that, 2 weeks ago, he's not taking that extra step. He's not, remaining calm under pressure. He's probably doing a hat kick instead of hitting the easy target 20, 30 metres away. And look, hopefully in front of, 80,000 momentous occasion, that the big freeze is that this is a starting point for Ed Allen and something that he can grab great confidence in going forward.
Certainly a much more improved game, and you're right. Just seeing him flourish in the midfield, it makes a difference when you look at the output that he did produce yesterday. I'm still not sure about him as a tagger, to be honest. I think he just gets drawn into the footy way too much. And when you're playing on a player like Cozzy Pickett, who's got an amazing football IQ and knows the right spots to be at, if that ball spills out, that allows Cozzy to get into space and create opportunities. I think he's obviously got a lot to learn, and he's still very young in his career. I just would rather see him as a pure midfielder and being there as one of our two-string midfield attacks when we've got Nick around the ball as well.
100%. I think we're crying out for a defensive midfielder, and for whatever reason, poor Ned Long has been played at centre half forward for reasons that are still beyond me. Goes back to the twos. We'll get to his performance later in the show, but I think they're looking for a role for Ed Allen in that midfield, knowing his body of work at VFL level has been inside mid. And for him to come and play a role that he's probably never played before as a tagger defensive midfield type who can still bounce very quickly when he gets onto it from the inside to the out. Bont last week in the final term clearly did enough good work there to say, we'll give you a run on Cozzy. Apparently, Ed Allen was on the bench to start the match, and in that time, Cozzy kicked 2 goals. But for the rest of the match, Cozzy's going to have impact like Nick has impact. Can you curtail it is kind of the question. 28-3 on the stat line. We say, did Ed Allen do a good enough job? Again, I'll say he was not on the ground for the first 2 goals that Cozzy kicked. So it's a difficult one to examine. But I think Ed Allen deserves another crack as a defensive midfielder. Is that his role long term in this team? Probably not. But do I want to see him at half back or on a wing when I know he should be in the midfield? No, I don't. I want to see him given an opportunity to ride shotgun alongside Nick Dacos and Geordie DeGoey.
It's the clearest example of don't put blokes who are coming up from the twos having stellar games in their respective positions in a completely different role for mine. And even we'll get to a little bit later in the VFL wrap, but this is a really good sign for me that Ned Long was dropped, played in position and dominated in the twos, because now the pressure goes back on Ed Allen. Righto, your spot is now up for grabs. If you don't perform well, we've got a bloke waiting in the twos, raring to go, who's playing your position absolutely perfectly, who already has AFL experience. So I think that's actually a really good thing, and I'm glad this week, although, you know, it's never nice to see anyone get dropped, I'm glad that we picked our side based on position and not based on names.
Maybe a roll on Zach Butters in the first game after the bye. That might give us a good insight.
Goes, yeah.
Potter caught my eye. I went for Harry Perryman because the gap between him being on the ground and him not being on the ground is pretty stark at the moment. He's been one of our most influential players, and we knew this already. He was the top 5 in our Copeland last year, and when he went down, structurally we were just so out of shape in the back line, and particularly with Braden Maynard going down and having to move some magnets. I felt Harry Perryman was very consistent in his return from injury, 20 disposals. He had 7 intercepts, which I think was the most for a pie outside of Billy Frampton, 410 metres gained. He just showed some good poise in a game when the skills were very poor from both sides. It does stand out quite a bit. And there were some moments in that second and third quarter where he was just able to launch some really important score chains. There was one in the third quarter, I can't remember exactly who received the footy in the middle, but he won the ball at half back, delayed a handball to Josh Dacos, then decided not to go with him and then kicked it into the corridor where there was a Collingwood player standing all on his own. That led to a Jordan DeGoey shot on goal in that third term. And there was just moments like that happened often enough that felt to me that Perryman was still one of the most important players on the ground for me. And he's one of the most important players for us throughout this season if we are to stay sound in that back half. And just knowing that he was there gave me a little bit more comfort when the ball went near his area. Not a perfect game by any stretch, but I thought coming back from a few weeks away from injury, I thought he was very solid.
No, he had a good game, but I thought Pez made Dan Houston look that little bit less average yesterday by virtue of his intercepting. As we've talked about, his positioning is unbelievable. And really, for me, this was the game that said, depending on how we draft and develop some other potential halfbacks, Pez could be a midfielder for me in the next season or two. Really, he was playing a higher role for me yesterday, and he was sort of in that centre square, just making sure he was leaving his man coming up nice and pressuring the ball, and forced a lot of turnovers and just doesn't shit himself when it's in the clinches. And this was the sort of game where it was a hot footy across 4 quarters. We went through the corridor far more than we have in recent times, and get to some of the analysis about why that was the case. But we just looked a better side with Pez in there, and we looked a better side when we were trying to attack and making a bit of a game of ping pong. So full credit, and really we shouldn't notice just how much better we are and how much sturdier we are with one bloke coming back into the side with a defensive unit that's been working well this year. But he just made me far less nervous when the ball got into open space, Jacko.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 words, Nico. Does his job is all I've got to say about Harry Perryman. And again, we spoke a little bit about this when he went out of the side, that we shouldn't be too worried, because if someone like Harry Perryman is the difference between us, you know, looking solid and not looking solid, then we've got bigger issues. Well, we must have bigger issues, because seriously, when he comes in, you know, his skill was clean. He made great decisions, as you both have just mentioned, which is something that we just lack right across the park at the moment, and feeds into probably a bigger point about why we lost this game. I thought our skills on the day in a hot footy against a pretty highly skilled team in Melbourne was just poor. We gave up the footy far too easily in far too many dangerous spots on yesterday's game on Monday. So, look, very disappointing. But however, a shining light in all of that is that Pez has come straight back in from the injury, and you know, again, it's just doing his job.
So you talk about that ping pong style that we saw for much of yesterday's game. And look, I have to commend Collingwood in a way, because for the first couple of months of the season, we were lamenting in how boring our game style was. And Fly mentioned it quite a bit in his presser. We want to try to get back to that footy that excites people, that gets fans coming through the gates. Well, we got to see that, which was fantastic, and Melbourne played their part in that as well. But as you said, Jacko, unfortunately, we just did not have the skills to complement that game style. Too many times we were handballing at people's feet. Too many times we were kicking the ball incredibly poorly inside our forward 50. And it's just those little things that can make the difference in such a tight game. And it's not just Monday. It's happened many times throughout the year where we've had close results arguably in part due to the fact that our skills have been so poor, and it's multiple players, experienced players as well, which is the really concerning thing. It gives me a little bit of hope that that could be the difference between where we sit right now and where we could be in terms of a ladder position being in a top 6 sort of area. At the same token, we're the oldest list in the competition. There's no excuse for some of these players to have such poor skill sets, because we know that they're better than that, but they're just not producing it. Is it the pressure that other sides are giving us at the moment? Is it a bit of concern about how, what's the right word? Like, we just felt panicky. I think that's probably the right way to say it a lot of the time. And I don't know how much of that it's the opposition or if there's other aspects to it, but yeah, it is a crazy difference when we're not getting our skills right.
We do have an experience list, but I've maintained that with some of those outliers, in particular Steele and Pendles, who make us look very experienced, that they're obviously well and truly into the twilight of their careers, and they can't really sustain that sort of that slingshot footy that we grew to know and love throughout season 2022, 2023 in particular. And then I wonder if we've got a relatively inexperienced set of young guys coming through, and that combination was just like not quite up to it the way we were when the shape of our list was like prime premiership window in like those glory days a few years ago. So that's my take on it, Nico. But in saying that, there's definitely a sense that while we have an appetite to be able to play that way, maybe the coaches don't trust the collective experience that we have across the list to do it week in, week out, because we've week to week now got probably 5 or 6 guys who have played not much footy at all, and then we've got a set of other guys at the other end of the spectrum who can't really play ping pong footy every single week, but that is the brand that teams are learning to play in order to win games, because it's becoming a more attacking game come season 2025 onwards, I feel. So, look, I'm still in favour of us trying to adopt this game style, though, because I still think when we have to play instinctive footy, that when we turn the ball over, I back our defensive system in to still turn the ball back over. And I think we saw a lot of that yesterday compared to this slow, boring style, which is not in keeping with what the modern game style wants. I think we've seen case studies in Essendon and Carlton with their coaches sacked because they're not playing a game style that's contemporary enough to compete. And so through the back half of this season, I reckon it's going to be really compelling viewing to see if we A, play the kids, and B, encourage them to take risks and make mistakes the way Fly did a few years ago.
Well, I think we should, because I looked at yesterday's game, and we speak about Pendles, who had somewhat of a quieter game as well, and maybe Howie's on that list as well. Another one of these blokes who really is at the twilight of their career, as you mentioned there, Marcus. And you can understand if their skills are quite up to it, their running power is not quite up to it. But I've got a bit of a list here. I looked at yesterday's the kids, and I thought they all played their role to perfection. You're going to expect an errant handball or a bad decision here and there, but that's all down to experience in the long term. But for me, especially in that last quarter, as soon as we lost the lead, it's Josh Dacos, Jack Crisp, Isaac Quainer, Dan Houston. All these blokes have been on the big stage before. Houston's the outlier. He wasn't on the big stage when he played for Collingwood, but, big enough stage playing over in Adelaide for Port Adelaide in prelim finals and the like. So these are the blokes that didn't step up when the pressure was on in that last quarter. These are the blokes that wilted away, and these are the blokes who looked like they'd never won a close game of footy ever before. And it's so interesting you bring up that appetite point before, Marcus, because I am starting to question, after all those close wins in 2022, 2023, and so on, the flag and all that, do they have the appetite to go again, to when their backs are out against the wall, to really take a risk, to put their body on the line, to, try and break a line, or are they just sort of kind of happy with their work so far? Look, that's, me probably speaking more from frustration and anger, but I was really disappointed with how Melbourne got the lead in the last quarter, and it was like, despite making some mistakes across 3.5 quarters of footy, we just hit the panic button flat out, and it was just like all of our plan that we had, all of our ethos as Collingwood over the last 3 to 4 years just dissipated. And honestly, I said it after the game, we lost that game like Carlton and Essendon have lost games to us in the last 3 years. It was dismal, and I'm really, really disappointed with how, when the pressure was on and when Melbourne hit the front, how some really key contributors to this side of the last 3 or 4 years who are still in the age bracket, who are going to be around for the next 4 to 5 to 6 to 10 years, wilted away under that pressure. It was really disappointing.
And I think we don't help ourselves in the positions before a Melbourne does hit the front because of our inability to make the most of our opportunities inside forward 50. There were 3 or 4 players that had valuable set shots or chances in front of goal that weren't taken, when otherwise that can really hurt the confidence of a side when those opportunities aren't being put through. And then all of a sudden it reverts back to what you said, Jack, about that mentality of, oh, okay, things aren't going our way here. Maybe I need to be a little bit more careful with the football. And then that in turn doesn't happen because you're thinking too much about what decision I need to make next. So, yeah, they're both very valid points. I think the experience comes down to it, and I'm with you on some of those plays, particularly Crispy and Josh Dacos. I thought were two that were highlighted, particularly in that last quarter, about how poor they were with their decision making.
And how many times does it need to happen? How many times have we sit here after, we've had this loss, I think about 4 or 5 times now this season. Melbourne, Fremantle. We almost lost the Carlton game or dropped the Carlton game in the same fashion. We dropped the Hawthorn game in the same fashion. But, Josh Dacos has a reasonably brilliant game, but got to the last quarter when, again, the pressure was on, bombing it down the line to no one, high kicks that are going far longer
Just
up in the air. Then exactly, just not even looking, not even making decision making. It's almost like, I'll just palm that responsibility off to someone else. Unlike in 2022, 2023, last season, where these blokes who had been there, done that before, they remained calm, they broke the line. Look, Nick gets caught holding the footy in that last quarter, and essentially that is game over. But I like how he's still trying to do something. He's still trying to break the lines. He's still trying to get away. Was it a bad decision in the moment? Yes, it was. But I'd rather see that than when a bloke is free in acres of space, just, hack down, kick down the line and palm the responsibility off to someone else. I thought it was really, really poor. And again, I'll make the point, it wasn't our young blokes that were doing this. It wasn't Rowan Steele who was spraying everywhere. It wasn't Ed Allen who was spraying everywhere. He might have had 1 or 2 bad kicks. It was Jordan De Goey, Dan McStay in the forward half of the ground, Nico, who weren't capitalising on, the good work that we did have. It's disappointing because these guys aren't your Scott Pendlebury's, your Jeremy Howes, your Steele Solventums. These guys are still going to be around for this rebuild phase if we do happen to go through one. And I just thought, look, I don't want to say it's an attitude thing, but it just seemed like, it was, I don't want to be the bloke to do it this week. Someone else can worry about it.
It's very uncharacteristic, isn't it? So does this then force upon some big personnel changes to the second half of the season? Because I'm in the boat of Marcus where I'll be very fascinated about how we approach team selection over the next few months. If there's a priority to get some young players in and get to that 20, 30 game threshold before we attack what the next couple of years look like, or if there's still that belief in the Collingwood coaching staff that the veterans of this side need to be respected and given the opportunity to still play each and every week. I think the Still Sidebottom case is very compelling considering the fact that he was, let's say, managed. I'm not really sure I buy that too much, to be honest, but managed off an 8-day break and then going into a bye doesn't really sit well with me. Why don't we just go out and say what it is? But I think we're starting to slowly initiate that transition for some of those types of players. But the makeup of our side is still going to be very interesting going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably something we'll talk just as much about the week-to-week performances, who got to play and in what position, and is there some sort of role being defined for that player that they can plug away at, provided they are playing at the level. Just on Steele, again, hard to say all of these things, and it's amazing how quickly we can move on when we're a bit grumpy as fans, but I thought we looked better without him out there, Jack.
Exactly. Like that's, I'm sitting here going like, who do you bring him in for? I'm looking at the teams as we speak, and I think, Howie's now getting into that stage as well. He had some poor moments yesterday where he wasn't able to get to a contest, got to a contest and just didn't impact. It's starting to get to the point now. Bo McCreary's in this conversation as well. Obviously, much different age demographic, but impact on the game. Really, is he doing enough to keep his spot? But back to the Steele point, like who do we swap out? Because I'm not having the rest of the season where Steele Sidebottom plays back pocket. He's not impacting the game back there. All right, if you're going to find a position for him, get him up forward. He's one of Collingwood's best midfielders, if not one of the best midfielders the game's ever seen. He's got an elite goal sense. Get him somewhere on the ground where he's going to actually have an impact. back there is not it. So I'm racking my brain over this now. And yeah, to me, this is just feeding further into the fact that we just need to play the kids, like, get them in there, get that experience, get that 30-game threshold, as you said, Nico, because, what's the use? And look, in the back half of the season, when the season is well and truly mathematically gone, which we all fear it's going to get to that stage sooner rather than later, then you can, have your retirement parade with Steele Sidebottom and Jeremy Howe, and the question still remains whether or not Pendles is going to go on. But for now, like, we got to get a little bit more serious about this. I think we've been umming and ahhing about it, too much up until this point in the season. For me, although there's still positives to take out of this game, we're only a kick or two out of it. We made some terrible mistakes. If we had to kick straight, all this stuff. But for me now, we are not bloody good enough. All right. And we need to do something about looking towards the future. And if it doesn't happen now, then we might get caught like deer in the headlights in a season or two's time.
Well, this is why I really felt that these 2 weeks, the Dogs game and the Diggers game, were going to be a big telling point as to what the year looked like. And I feel calmer now knowing that we have dropped both those games, because it has given me personally as a fan, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot more clarity on what the direction needs to look like going forward. And it's right, you're right. Even though we did lose both those games by single-digit margins, there's nothing there that suggests to me, well, if we just get this right and we just move this a little bit, we can be a true contender, because the reality is that's just not the case. And yeah, it presents now a good 11-week patch out of the bye for us to really try and test what these players are capable of. Let's see what a 10-game stretch of Ed Allen will bring. Let's see what Ned Long back in his true position will provide to us going forward. Let's see what some of these other players that are teetering around the VFL. I mean, we're going to really test what that back six looks like with no Maynard. We're likely going to miss Billy Frampton for some time as well, and no Darcy Moore at this stage of the season. So it's going to be so intriguing as to what comes next.
And I kind of think optimistically about it, if this is the strategic direction the coaches do choose to take with playing the kids and favouring youth over the tried and tested. With those guys that have now gone down and adding Jamie Elliott to that list, does that give us an opening to say, okay, we probably know we're not good enough even to hit that sort of 10th spot to make up a wild card position? And over the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks after the bye, we talked about release of shackles last week and start to play a bit more through the midfield and take the game on. I'd love to see that, but also know that you can try some guys with almost a bit of a caveat that we don't have anywhere near our best side out there, experienced heads, premiership players, and then almost giving a bit of permission to play the youth as well in terms of how the fans are going to think about what can be conjured from the rest of this year. So I really am in favour of, like, Joel Cochran. I know he's very close to being fully fit. Give him a run. Tujath, give him a run at some point. Charlie West, give him a multi-week run. I thought we haven't got to him yet, but is it Mitch Podajewski? Is that
Podajewski, yeah.
Podajewski. Look, keep him in. I thought he gave us a different look up forward. Again, first game at the level and looked a bit slow out there. Hot footy, but yeah, like, there's just so many names that I think are part of the future that are different to those guys who are either going to be retired out or not given a contract beyond this season or next season. And I'd rather get that transition process going now that we know that we're probably not as good as we thought we perhaps were.
We're not going to know any less by giving these players a go.
Exactly. Oh, I fixed the Steel Sidebottom incumbent problem, by the way. Pat Lipinski. He can have a rest next week if you want to squeeze Steel Sidebottom in.
28 touches.
28 touches. Ineffective. Not running two ways. And there was a lot of that yesterday. I don't want to put that all on Pat Lipinski, but there was a lot of that early. I mean, look, we laud him for his amazingness, but I said in game yesterday, it's almost like Nick Dacos has got a license not to defend at all. And I understand that's not his job, but really that does expose us in other areas of the ground and probably something that we need to talk to. And I just wonder if that sort of, I don't know if it's an attitude thing again, but I wonder if that sort of, permeates throughout, a few others in this group, and Pat's certainly in that conversation. So
0 tackles.
Yeah, 0 tackles. I think Josh Dacos had one tackle.
One for Nick, one for Josh.
Dan Houston, 0 or 1 tackle, playing in the back line. So, Look, not great really when you're reading that. It's pretty stark. But yeah, if you're going to have to fit steel side bottom in, I think Pat Lipinski is the one that loses his spot.
Just curious, looking at the coaches' votes to come out of this game. I don't know if you've seen them. So only 2 Collingwood players received coaches' votes.
Bo.
So Nick got 6 and Bo squeezed in for a vote.
Well, that must have been was that Stephen King? Like, I can't imagine Craig McRae, just because he had 15 disposals and 11 tackles. Like, the amount of petrol that Bo McCreary wastes by just running around the football instead of trying to actually get the football, and then just like bumps a bloke as he's kicking it. I'm really getting sick of him. Like, he just needs to find a way to become a smarter and more effective footballer beyond just having his one wood, because the good players, as we know, become the great players either within their club or across the comp by bringing in a strength, exploiting it, but then they find other aspects to their game to take that next step. He's right in that sweet spot now. He's played 100 games and he has a premiership medal. He's got a big contract potentially from a rival club in Tassie on the table, but I'm just getting to the point where it's like, you're obviously going to play ones each week. You've done enough to show us that, but just do more. Like, I'm sick of seeing the same, and it comes across as a nice stat line, 15 disposals, 11 tackles, but I'm just like, I didn't really notice you, Bo, and there's too many other blokes like that at the moment.
And there were flashes where he came into the ground, won the contested footy, gave us a glimpse of hope. But again, the biggest piece with Bo, as Marcus just said, he goes missing in games for far too long. We're not just talking, half a quarter. It's quarters at a time where he's, you don't even notice him. You wonder if he's even out there. Look, his haircut doesn't help. He doesn't stand out as much with the big long locks. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. He needs to be doing more. And it's to further Marcus's point, the smart players find ways to impact on the game when they're not, performing with their one wood. And it's so clear at the moment that Bo McCreary doesn't know anything else other than just to go and tackle. And it's almost, we've said it jokingly for years, but he almost sometimes prefers his opponent to get the ball because, that's his one wood. He can go in and pressure them. But, now he needs to be doing a lot more.
Yeah, very surprising to see that name pop up, to be honest. Also wanted to make a quick note as well. Good news about Brody Myercheck this morning. Well, as good as it can be, of course. After I haven't been shaken like that in a while watching a football game with what happened, and a completely innocent mistake, we know, not according to the tribunal crew, but
should have kicked him in the face.
Well,
that
may as well.
Yeah, we may as well have.
But yeah, good to see Brody walking around this morning. Had his surgery and that was a success. So wishing him all the best. I mean, you don't want to see it happen to any player, but when in particular it happens to a favourite son of ours over the years, a premiership pie. It was very, very cruel to see, but it's just good to know that he's slowly on the mend.
For sure. And again, like when a bloke is not even able to roll onto his back, it's pretty serious stuff. So when it happened, I'm not sure if people thought it was concussion or if it was neck or if it was some sort of, awful spinal injury. It sounds like he's had a fracture that's been repaired and he's up and about, and who knows what his timeline is. So thoughts go out to Checkers. Great touch that Melbourne players let the Pies players go over there and give him a quick, "You're all right, mate," as he got stretchered off. But let's get to what really matters for us Collingwood fans. The 3 weeks to Billy Frampton coming through today. I called it in our chat yesterday. I'm like, I don't think it's a concussion, but I can just see this ending in this horrendous rule, or the way it's ruled by the MRO. High impact, careless, and severe. So that's how it's graded.
But it was also holding the ball.
Yeah, like the ball went the other way, but they've still found a way to rub him out for 3 weeks. This will be appealed, and as it should be taken to tribunal and heard, because this rule around protecting their head is paramount for the game, and the AFL is shitting themselves because of the class action that continues to build with more and more ex-players coming out and trying to get money they're entitled to for not being looked after, particularly in years gone by. But I feel very strongly about this space and the way that it's currently adjudicated for an incident like this, where, like, you talk about split seconds in footy and not being able to do anything else. It's like it was a football act. Yes, he got him high. These accidents happen in a contact sport. To rub a bloke out for 3 weeks when he hasn't actually sustained a concussion, which is what it's currently in the rule book for, Yes, there's other ways you can get injured above the shoulders, as this was, but I'm absolutely perplexed as to how this can be given 3 weeks.
Well, first of all, I want to echo your points about Checkers. I was gutted to see that. I mean, you never want to, I said I would have loved to have seen him kick a goal against us. I know you don't want to see him go. Obviously, we still win, and that's fantasy. But what the body of work that he gave us for how little, he was awarded in terms of contracts and stuff like that. He will be a favourite son of mine for a long, long time, and I really wanted to see him go well. Had a quiet game up until that point, and it was scary sitting there at the ground yesterday, not really knowing what was going on. I think there might have been one replay on the actual,
it's bad when
screened, and then everyone's scrambling on their phones to try and see it. So no one had any idea what was going on. Just so thankful today that, although it is still a very serious injury, that he is going to be okay. However, back down to Marcus's point about, the tribunal decision, it's a football act, and we get so swept up in the result of what happens. We are playing a high impact, highly physical game. People are going to get hurt. It happens. Don't freak out just because it happens and then make a decision based on the result of a serious injury, which is not even, as Marcus said, in this case, a concussion. If you watch it again, the tackle on slow-mo, and no doubt that'll get replayed over the next 48 hours or so. But if you watch what happens, Billy Frampton nails a textbook tackle. He has one arm free, Brody Myercheck, and as he goes to the ground, he elects to try and handball the ball and get it out because he's been caught. But unfortunately, in this split second, in handballing, his one arm that he's got free to handball gets taken away from him from the tackle, which is not taken away from Billy Frampton, but he kind of slips, and then that stops him from being able to, brace himself to hit the ground as they probably normally would, or roll in a somewhat normal fashion, which results in injury. I don't think it's Brody Myercheck's fault. I don't think it's Billy Frampton's fault. I think these things happen in footy, and we've just got to accept that. We can't wrap the competition up in bubble wrap and expect that these things aren't going to happen. Yes, it's not the 80s and the 90s or the 70s or whatever, where blokes are belting people behind the play or giving ear massages. We don't want to see that type of thing, but we do still have to accept that in the modern game, no matter how much you try and rub it out or how much rules you try and change, people are going to sustain serious injuries, whether it be broken arms, head injuries, and unfortunately in this case, a more severe one in neck, spinal area. I just think we flinch so quickly when it comes to these things, and the AFL, by virtue of the fact that they are being sued by ex-players for a completely different reason, by the way, in concussion, that this is an outcome-based decision, not a in the moment, and Billy Frampton hasn't been suspended based on his tackle. He's been suspended based on the outcome to his opponent.
Which is how the current system is set up. And again, I think it's great that there's more of an effort than ever to protect the head. It's just the fact that the other bit of the mechanism that caused this injury was, and Checkers used to do this a lot, where he'd get a ground ball, watching a lot of Collingwood footy, and he's a big, powerful guy. He almost drives like a rugby player in a scrum, whenever he's trying to propel himself forward. And I think that he tried to hit eject to get away from Bill Frampton, but unfortunately got crunched, literally, and then his head was not in a very good position at all. And then it was just a football act that led to a really bad accident occurring. And I'm absolutely shocked that the AFL think that's the appropriate cause of action. I know they've got to follow a framework, and they've graded it. Michael Christian is graded as this, this, and this. Therefore, there's your weeks. But Nico, surely this has to be contested.
Well, how much weight gets taken into the fact that the umpires actually paid this holding the ball prior to play being stopped and the medicos going out for Brody Myercheck? Because I think that's the most perplexing thing here. It's that the umpires, in the heat of the moment, in the field of battle, have deemed that action first and foremost, before anything else, to be holding the ball. So then, okay, if that is the case, how can that quickly become such an act where you're getting 3 weeks for it? That's probably the thing that confuses me about this whole thing, and I think that's where a lot of the frustration began once Billy Frampton received the ball and the boos rung out right around the MCG. But you're right. I think it will be contested, and I think there will be at least some weeks dropped, you would feel like. But at the same token, as soon as the outcome is this case with Brodie, I think it's going to be very hard to get off.
And you watch, once there's a clearer timeline around Brodie Mychek's time on the sidelines, or suspected time on the sidelines. Like, I'm not sure if this is a fracture that results in him missing the rest of the year, if he's out for another month, 2 months. I'm just not sure yet. But I promise you, once that detail becomes clearer, that will influence whether there's any sort of speculation that Bill Frampton could get off. And I mean, look, you look at Frampton, just how remorseful he was immediately after too. This is a bloke he played in a flag with. Clearly had no intention of coming late or coming high in that football act. It's just a freak accident. And so if it's not contested, I know that the AFL will put up every bloody reason that they shouldn't overturn the decision that was made. But yeah, I would hope that what you mentioned about the free kick being paid being a very, very strong argument when it goes before the tribunal.
So careless conduct, severe impact, high contact, as you said before, were the grading mechanisms.
It's ridiculous, mate. Listen to what you said. High contact. If it was high contact, it should have been a free kick. Welcome to the AFL, where you can stick your leg out and trip a bloke as he's running past and get a $1,000 fine. But when you caught someone with an almost textbook tackle and get a free kick going your way, you have to sit on the pine for 3 weeks. It's laughable.
Ed Allen also with a $1,000 fine, if you're wondering.
Deserve that.
Umpire contact.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anything else from this game, gents?
Positives. I thought Jack Buller really stood up at some really crucial times. And much like Tim Membry, you really feel like he fights to get to every contest. He fights even when he's he's lead, he doesn't get on it. He fights to double back, fights to find another option. And I'm really impressed to see that. Although, he doesn't leap off the stat sheet, some 2 huge grabs at still crucial stages in that game, and was able to, go off and finish his work. So here's a positive that I want to highlight. Shooter's another one I wanted to highlight, not for so many positive reasons, but I think, again, it was starting to sort of slip back into that 2024, conversation about him where he's doing all the hard work, running his guts off for us, trying to get to every contest, but he's just not finishing off his work. One at the top of the square yesterday where he just needed to take his time. And look, he's certainly not alone. Dan McStay in that boat as well. Missed a couple of opportunities to, we talk about Perryman doing his job. Well, that's Dan McStay's job. He's competing, he's flying up for the ball more than what he was probably a month or so ago, but he's still got to finish off those couple of set shots. And Jordan De Goey is probably in that conversation this week as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, I thought Geordie's game was very, difficult to get excited about based on that last effort. I mean, this is Mr. Big Time. This is someone we're used to slotting match winners in big games, and I just thought it was a very poetic moment for our season when a guy who's just coming off probably the best 6 weeks we've seen him play for some time misses that opportunity. Look, who knows, maybe the footy gods talk and the Dees end up winning anyway, but for a guy like Geordie to go, like, you could say he was properly pissed off with himself for missing that final set shot. And so, we were wasteful in that last term, did not take our chances. So look, it'll be really interesting to see how Geordie keeps his head up through the back half if we don't go particularly well. But just the final point I wanted to make, Nico, was just more of a comment that I heard Maxi Gawn make in his interview in the post-match, and he said that he had a really hard time marking the ball, intercepting it, and I thought that was a really key aspect of this game that we got right in the coach's box, where we weren't just bombing it down the line to Max Gawn. He took 5 grabs for the game, 0 contested, and for Max Gawn to still have so much influence, got the better of Darcy Cameron well and truly with the 46 hit-outs, but we're up in clearance across this match, which is a really positive sign. I just thought we weren't kicking it down the line, and we actually elected to go through the corridor more, and while it created a lot of turnovers and it was a game of basketball, it felt like throughout this match, I still prefer that game style with the Pies compared to playing low-risk, boring footy. So if we can emulate that and take that forward, I'll be happy.
I thought DC wasn't terrible.
No, just got. Really? I mean, just up against the best ruckman in.
I'm not. From a ruck point
history.
of view, you're absolutely right. He got slaughtered.
Bullied.
He did.
Yeah.
But more around the ground, he took some critical defensive contested marks.
Very important.
Let's forget the fact that he just chipped it straight to Cozzy Pickett across goal.
Oh my god.
But I thought he wasn't terrible, but he clearly needs some help.
He's underdone.
Clearly needs some help.
I'm in Marcus's boat. This bloke has to be carrying something. it was to the point where even Dan McStay, Jack Buller, and that were getting their turn the ruck and were competing with Gawn in the air. There was times where it looked like he was even struggling to meet Gawn halfway in the centre bounce, and it was quite stark how I don't think I've seen Darcy Cameron get beaten up like that in the centre of the ground or in the ruck contest like that for a long time. And he is such a high quality player, and I'm certainly not putting a line through him or anything like that, but he has to be underdone or carrying something, because he was very well beaten yesterday, Nico.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but it's just unfortunately we don't really have many other choices of where to go. But he did make up for it, I felt, with his marking around the ground. That is for sure. All right, votes please, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Before we get back into it, a quick shout out to Revo Fitness, because honestly, $9.69 a week for a gym membership is just ridiculous value, and I feel like more people need to know about it. No lock-in contracts, no hidden fees, just rock up and train. Free weights, cardio, and functional training. It's all there 24/7, so you've got no excuse not to give it a go. I feel like there'd be a lot of players that would have some big egos at the gym. Who's one that would like to just trump everyone with just how much they lift?
I reckon maybe not how much they lift, but Scotty Pendlebury, I reckon he still gets it done, Nico. So he might be a shining star down at Revo.
And if you want to go full send, maybe like Pendles, $3 extra a week gets you unlimited Reformer Pilates, massage chairs, and eVault body scans. $3 extra, that's it. They've got clubs all over the country, so there's likely one near you. Head over to reveofitness.com.au. That's revofitness.com.au.
Gone one vote to Bill Frampton. I thought his response after such an enormous occasion to happen in a match where a bloke could very well drop his head, go internal. I've just potentially done something really bad to an ex-premiership teammate. Like, that could really rock you in a game. But I thought his response, he had the 11 intercept possessions. There was also a moment in the last term where he kind of fell over, picked up an entry from the Dees, and then like in one motion popped out a handball. So Bill Frampton doing Bill Frampton things. I thought he was epic. 2 votes I went to Pez. I thought structurally he was that important, and we probably leak more goals if he's not in the right place at the right time. Haven't talked about him, just 35-2 if you don't mind. That goal in the first term from Nicky D was as good as you will see in front of the Ponsford. I was just absolutely electrified by that. And I think Cozzy gets the 3 votes, but Nick gets the 2 on Brownlow night. So there's my votes.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Very similar for mine. Bill Frampton, very stiff to miss out. I still think if Jordan Ugoe kicks one of those last 2 goals in either the third or the second, we're lauding him and he's potentially even, best on ground. But by virtue of the fact he doesn't get them, the conversation goes into the negative. But again, his consistency throughout the last 6 games has been everything that we've been crying out for Collingwood supporters. And unfortunately wasn't able to finish off his work. Got on the end of a couple of really nice goals, but in crunch time couldn't finish it. So we don't think too favourably about it, but I've still given him 1. I gave 2 to Pez and 3 to Nick.
So my 2 and 3 were the same. This is going to be very, very controversial. I'm giving Bruzzy 1 because there was no one else in my mind that deserved 1 vote, and he showed enough in 27% game time than a lot of other players that were wearing black and white on Monday, and we are really going to miss him out there. I mean, we spoke about it off the top. It's not just what he was producing on Monday. It's what he's been producing all year from a leadership sense, but also with his talent. Well, we were talking as this being a career best year for Braden Maynard, and unfortunately now he's going to cop this setback.
We did talk about top 3 in the Copeland a month or so ago. He probably hovers around the top 5 up until this point in the season. So it's a shame that he will probably not see a great deal more footy. And if he gets back, there's a good chance he'll injure himself again unless he has the surgery. So we'll see what decision they make. Is the only silver lining the fact that now for this season, Nick Dacos has to be captain because there's no one else there.
All the dominoes are falling around him. It's pretty much Nick or bust, isn't it?
Seriously, Darcy Moore might not play again this season. We don't know what his rehab plan is quite like yet based on the medical advice he'll get. And I just reckon it's a really interesting thing in terms of we've talked about who's captain next year. Bruzzy is probably doing everything to suggest he could be for next season. But if Nick gets the back half of this year as captain because there's no one else there, what's the conversation we have at the end of the year?
Give it to Pendles just to round it out.
Yeah, that would be good. Well, it's interesting as well. When Braden Maynard did go down, you notice that Pendles was the one that was leading the chats, half-time, 3/4 time before the boys overtook it. Look, not only this is an opportunity for the captaincy to be handed on to Nick, but I also think this is an opportunity for someone else in this bloody football club to stand up
Absolutely.
and play that Braden Maynard role. You know, it's everything that we've been crying out for: effort, intensity, pressure, and it's everything that he and Shooter gives us every single week. And not a lot of blokes are behind them in doing that. So this is a chance for someone else to step up and be the Braden Maynard for us. And hopefully, not just one person, hopefully about 5 or 6 players stand up, and we'll be a much better side for it, Nico.
Couldn't agree more. Very well said, gents. It's been a great episode so far, but if it was just us three talking for an hour, I don't know how many people would still be tuning in. We need to get some fan input, as we always do with SpeakPie. So thank you very much for everybody that sends through their voice memos. We got quite a few, as you could imagine, from the game. Can't get to them all, but let's get through as many as we can, and we're going to start with David. So thank you very much.
Hey, Pies Nation boys, it's Dave here again, and it's a close loss again. The deja vu isn't quite as bad this time, just simply because of the occasion. Somehow it seems fitting that Melbourne just overcome the odds at the end of that one. But gee, just being good enough to compete so often, but not good enough to close the deal is really getting frustrating. A game with highlights, but highlights don't give you 4 points. Consistency does, and gee, just taking the shot and making the shot when it matters. Keep playing the kids. It's good to see them. Get Charlie West back out there as well. And geez, poor Checkers and poor Bruz. Really felt for both. We carry on.
Yeah, I'd love to get Charlie West back out there. Let's just see. Let's just see what he's got. He had an interrupted year last year, only managed one game. He's been in and out of this side since coming back.
Give him
What's
a
the
run.
harm?
Give him a run,
What
like
is
a
the
fair
harm?
run at it.
But look, we'll get to it in the VFL wrap a bit more about his performance, but is Membry the one who has to have a spell
Has to.
in order for us
Has
to
to.
think about the future? Because I'm not seeing enough from Membry to warrant selection at the moment
No,
either.
it has to be.
His curtains are closing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be very shocked if he plays beyond this year, the skunk.
I think
you
Marcus
won't.
brought it up in our group chat, but is it concerning if your name is Charlie West that someone like a Pajowski comes in, you know, from the mid-season draft? Obviously a much more mature body, been around the game a little bit longer, but how concerning is that for him that this bloke just comes in straight away and gets a game, you know, a fortnight later after not really even being on an AFL list, and he's been toiling away doing all the right things in the VFL and still gets snubbed. You know, if I was Charlie West, I could understand if he was pretty disgruntled with that.
It was me that said it. But yeah, I
sorry,
think
Nico.
that I think it's a major concern because this is a player that you've put a whole lot of years of development into, that you've trusted enough to get some senior opportunities already, that hasn't really put much wrong to suggest that he should be out of this side on a permanent basis. And to be honest, this was at a time where I thought Jack Buller wasn't going to return into this side either. And I've mentioned to you guys multiple times already that if we're playing games without at least one of those two in the team, considering the position where we're at, then that is a massive red flag for me about what that forward line looks like in the next couple of years. Because Tim Membry, as serviceable as he's been in the 18 months he's been playing for Collingwood, there is no need to play him in the. He'd be more influential in the VFL with some of those younger talent and being a teacher for them in that system than him playing AFL football and just potentially kicking a goal. I'm not saying that he does nothing for us out there in the senior side, but we need to see what Charlie West, we need to see what Jack Buller and other forwards, I guess Pajowski now, if we're going to stick with him for a little bit, we need to see what they're bringing to the table, Marcus.
Yeah, we do. I heard Fly say that Pajowski come in because he was able to play a role that others have not been able to fulfill since Jamie went down, and I think there's a little bit of merit in that. I'm still not sure what Pajowski's role actually is, but clearly in that forward line system, Fly wanted to give that a go. And then my other point is that I agree we need to work out what that mix is around mixed day in terms of the tall timber. But yeah, are we too slow and too tall if West, Buller and McStay all play together? I'm not sure, but I'd like to see them experiment with it. And if Membry is unfortunately the guy who has to come out for Charlie West, I reckon that that's a better move for the back half of this season than playing a guy who's, again, right at the end of his career.
Couldn't agree more. Lockie is next up.
Look, fellas, I'm walking home from Rosanna Station at the moment. It's a bit of a trek. I've got to say I'm a little disappointed. We had 3 set shots in the fourth quarter, straight on from goal. Had a bit of distance on them, but nothing that Zagoe, McStay and Buller couldn't handle. And they managed to go 0-3. And then the Dees make something out of nothing on a couple of plays, and that's the difference in the game. And I don't want to blame individuals. I do want to say, though, that Sidey would have been handy tonight. I was impressed with Ed Allen's intensity. And as always, Lockie Schultz gave his everything, despite dropping a couple of decent marks. It did seem, though, that when under pressure, rather than looking for the next man like we have in the past, it was just put it on the boot, and it's a high ball, hoping that when it comes to ground, we can make something of it. And as we've shown thus far this season, that's not been a way that we win games. So it was unfortunate when Dacos got run down, but I feel like that really was the story of the night. It was a little bit of a lack of awareness. And, of course, a shout-out to Neil Danaher and the Fight MND crew, and go Pies.
Better with Steele on the side?
Yeah, I tend to disagree, to be honest with you. I think this game was a game of ping pong, and Pendle struggled in this match to really be influential because there wasn't a great deal of stoppage. There was a lot of transition. So I wouldn't have thought Steele would have thrived in those conditions.
Or not playing back pocket, he wouldn't have.
No, put him in the forward line. Nick is next. Oh, thank you for that, Lockie. That was good. Nick's next.
G'day, fellas. Nick here. Geez, it's frustrating to lose another close one. We've had multiple opportunities again to ice that game, and again, we've just failed to take our opportunities. And as frustrated as I am, I'm also mildly content just knowing where we are as a team now. I think it's safe to say that we're not good enough to compete with the top teams in the comp. It's a pattern of behaviour now, and I really hope in the second half of the year we start having a look at some guys that haven't had many opportunities, and just see what they've got, and hopefully this helps progress a little bit for next year. And I would rather us finish 14th or 15th than try and squeeze into the top 10, because I'd rather us try and get a higher draft pick and just give a different look with some different guys. But yeah, frustrated, but good to see Ed Allen getting some midfield time. I think he's someone who's really benefiting, and I wouldn't mind a couple others getting a crack as well.
Yeah, well, so we've got our first round draft pick this year, so that's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think by the time any compensation picks or whatever blow out the draft order, then if we end up finishing where we currently are, it'll end up being pick 10 or 11. So again, I don't like losing. It's an awful feeling. It creates a sense of uncertainty, but at the moment we need that in order to create some certainty about us being no good for this year. So those top 10 picks, if we can get them over the next season or two, I will maintain are as important as anything, because we have very little at the trade table to offer.
But for me, it's that I'd rather be lower down the ladder for the draft pick and whatnot. Well, I know what I'd rather. I'd rather be lower down the draft order, having played the kids and had a really good look at them, as opposed to just continue how we're going with the same personnel out there with no accountability week in, week out, and end up in the same bloody position, because then we're even more further away than what we thought.
Good point.
See, imagine how many Band-Aids over the cracks would be if we were winning every game. It'd be perfect. I'm not saying
We'd be like first, wouldn't we?
Yeah, exactly. This is Nick O this time, so thank you.
Morning, boys. Nico here. You know what I found at the MCG yesterday? I found peace. I'm at peace with where we are as a club right now. We're just a middle-of-the-road team that's, like I've said before, is going to beat some teams around them, some teams below them, not going to be able to regularly challenge the top 4 or 5. We can show, good patches in games, but we just don't do it for long enough in games at the moment. And we're a club and a team at the moment that has too many gaps that need to be filled, whether it be up forward, whether it be in the middle, and to a lesser degree, down back. As long as the club can realise where we are and what we need to do to change it and transition out so that we rise again, I'm okay. There wasn't all the ranting and raving yesterday after we lost, because I think yesterday, like I said, I finally was at peace with where we're at right now, but importantly, what we need to do moving forward.
I think that's the big one, really, is does the club understand the position? Or because the way that Fly was speaking on AFL 360 yesterday, it's we're going for every free agent we can. We're going to contend. Well, I don't know. How many more performances like yesterday need to happen before it hits the nail on the head for the recruiting staff and the coaching staff to be like, maybe we just need to tone it down a bit? I know Craig Kelly has been on record on saying that we need to go back to the draft, but I wonder if that's the same mentality that's been infiltrated across the board.
Yeah, I reckon Fly's demeanour in the last few weeks has just started to change, where he's going, oh shit, I don't know if this team that I have really assembled off the back of Bucks' core group is what it once was. And it's a bit of a harsh reality for you to face, but it's a bit of a contradiction, because in Fly's press last night, he's saying we're a middle of the road team.
Yeah.
So I appreciate why there's a desire there to go and get some free agents, but I'm not. If I'm the ones who are really in charge of the list management, which is what we hear, Fly's not in charge of list management.
Leper?
Which is bullshit. Of course, he's in charge of list management. Leper. I will be filthy if we go and try and trade away a first or a second round draft pick again. It is the most ludicrous thing I think we could possibly do. Our ticket to high-end talent is through the draft in the next few seasons. And look, maybe once Tassie come in, we're still an ordinary side for a couple of years. It's still through the draft because we've been away from it for too long. And if you're approaching a rebuild or if you're going through some transition, you've got to have ways to get good players to your club, like the Cats do, like the Hawks do. We don't have it, Jack.
Well, I suppose the thing that they'll be holding on to is 2023. You bring Tom Mitchell in as that sort of top up to what we needed at the time. But apart from that, the definition of insanity, Nico, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Since that time, yes, we got a flag out of it, but since probably the 2023 flag, we've brought in blokes, of this senior like ilk who just haven't quite come on or haven't been able to have an impact for a long period of time. And as we slip further and further down the ladder, those are not the sort of blokes that we need. The Dan Houstons of the world are nice top ups when you're a really well going side and flying high, but they're not the sort of blokes that are going to continue propping a club up or be part of what we all feel from the outside looking in will be, a bit of a dip in the history of the Collingwood Footy Club.
You know what, though? But I'm okay with the process up until this point. I was okay with them trying to trade in some high-end talent and go again with another flag, considering some of the veterans and the stages they were at in their careers. I mean, we were at the penultimate game of the year last year.
Oh, for sure.
So I have no issues with the strategy heading into the latter stages of last year and bringing in Dan Houston and Lockie Schultz and Harry Perryman and the like, because well, the proof's in the pudding. We were nearly close to at least another grand final. But the thing now
it's different.
Is do we have are we stubborn in saying that this is still the way we need to go forward? Or can we actually look back as a football club and think, okay, we've had our opportunity, the window was there, we got a premiership out of it, let's start that transitional phase.
Well, that's the crucial point about what I was putting on the radar last week. Is Fly the man to take us through what we think will be a drop in form and needing to blood young players, needing to bring high-end talent in through the draft? Because if he is stubborn and is maintaining that his strategy is to go to the well again, not through drafting players, but trading them, then I think that's an absolutely ridiculous move. I think we'll have way too much of a gap where we've got lots of blokes who are sort of 25 and above can play good footy, but that's not what a lot of experts will say is the foundations for bringing the next 10 years of success through. We saw it through, I was thinking about this, 2012 to 2014, we saw a similar thing happen where we just were bringing in duds and they weren't really helping us replenish. And then we got D Moore, we got JDG, we got Bruzzy, I mean, we had Jaden Stevenson, that didn't end well, but that for me was the start of this next core group of guys who came through with Steele and Pendles there and Howie and stuff. So I'll be filthy if we end up repeating that.
Like, even if the best case scenario for that, if we're going to go to this, looking at other clubs and drafting more mature players to our club, the only scenario where this works, where we can get back to competing immediately, is Lockie Neal, Zach Butters, and Ben King all have to come play for the Collingwood Footy Club. That is the only scenario where you can justify doing this. And even then, I still don't think we'd be a good enough side to be. No, even then, I still don't think that's a good enough. As Marcus said, shit idea to keep us propped up enough to make a run late into September. And that's like some people's dream scenario. I know Collingwood supporters that would think that if we got those 3 players next year, we'd be competing, and I disagree.
But what happens there is you do a St Kilda and you just throw like 30 to 40% of your salary cap for these blue chip players who will make an impact, no question. They'll get their Brownlow votes. They'll do well at the they'll do well, with goals kicked and all the rest of it. But like, it's not building team success.
No.
And I reckon our system does have good player development. I reckon we can turn players from being average to good to great, but we just need time and we need high-end talent that are young and they start at Collingwood and they stay at Collingwood.
Agree. Can't say it wouldn't be that bad though with them around. But
It'd be good for a short-term period for 3 years maybe.
If we were having this conversation at the start of the year, coming off a prelim final with the idea of having those 3 names maybe coming to play for our football club, it is mouth-watering.
I'm being facetious, but
again, looking at where we're at, which is probably where, as a supporter base, and certainly within this studio, where we've been most frustrated this season, Marcus, is that we haven't had a close enough look at where we're at right now and what the impact for that in the future is. I don't feel we're still holding on too much onto a plan that might have worked 2 or 3 years ago, but doesn't seem like it's going to work going forward.
All right, let's wrap up with Irvin.
Guys, I got to say I'm straight up not enjoying this season anymore. I mean, it really barely got off the ground. Like, it's just, we've just been so bad at managing moments. I said it last week and I'm going to say it again. Oh, we had chances. That game was winnable. It was there for the taking, and it was played pretty well for a lot of it. But, like, who gives a shit? We lost. Again. So I'm just going to do what I do best, I guess, and try to bring some kind of optimism and hope in a season that's really starting to slip away now. I really don't see us playing finals, even with a wild card thing. And is it even worth it? Or is it just better to play the kids? Because we're at a real risk of jeopardizing our future if we keep going down this path of trying to squeeze essence out of the dying corpses of our senior players. Like, at some point, it's just like, we gotta focus on getting games into the Angus Andersons, the Rowan Steeles, the Ed Allens of the world. Speaking of Ed Allen, that's his best game for the club. Finally a full game as a midfielder, and he showed what he can do. Yeah, it was a bit rough around the edges at times. Can this fuck... Yes, that's Collingwood season, getting rushed to the hospital. It's about to flatline. You can hear those sirens in the background. Anyway, go Pies.
As optimistic as ever, let's get to Colin and then we can wrap there.
Hi, Pies Nations boys. Colin here. We are no longer the kings of the close finish. Those days are gone. As Fly said, we are a different side now. But are we not still practicing and training the close finishes? We played our guts out again, and this makes it 5 games that we've lost in the last quarter. Geordie, Nick, Shooter and Billy Frampton were great, and young Ed Allen did as good a job on Cozzy as anyone has during the year. At times, it looked as though we were trying a new 2-part system. The first part involved looking for a teammate under pressure, then handballing to their feet. The second part was making sure we kicked to a contest where we were outnumbered. It's getting very frustrating watching us make the same errors every week. And our set shots at goal, Jesus, 6 goals, 6. Geordie's shot in the last minutes was difficult, but gettable. And the fucking stay, we all groaned in our section when he got the free. I would like to see Sam Swadling, Harrison Coe and Charlie West all be in for our game against Port. The pod has to stay in, and maybe McStay and Membry get a rest, with Bruzzy out for a few weeks injured. Well, all we can do is keep trying and hope our decision-making and disposal efficiency improves. Until then, go Pies!
Beautifully said, as always, Colin. Thank you very much for all those that sent through their voice memos. Thanks to SpeakPie. So very much appreciated. So the crowd was 88,019, which was a record crowd for King's birthday between the Pies and the Dees. So outstanding that everyone was able to get involved and play their role in the fight against MND. Lukey's had the tight turnaround, so no guest to crowd this week, but I'm sure we'll get to that at some point, and obviously no guest to margin because guess what?
We lost.
We lost again. But guess who's back? It's Surge, and it's back in a big way because, Marcus, the VFL boys finally got themselves off their losing streak and got the 4 points.
And thank God, because you don't have to hear from me too much. But a big third term saw the Pies get on top by 8 points. This match relocated to Casey Fields from Vic Park.
A few issues there with Vic Park.
I know. It's a bit sad to see that the spiritual home is under duress there with the wet weather and being too leaky. But in any case, yes, we did get up. Great to have a win. I'll get to the Surge. Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Round 11 saw the Pies take on the Casey Demons. The match was moved from Vic Park and Casey due to drainage issues. The Pies made 7 changes with Co allowed out. A poor first quarter saw the Pies 19 points in arrears. In fact, this whole season they've only managed to win one of their first quarters. However, in the second quarter, the Pies started to get their game going, applying good forward pressure and pressure generally around the ground and winning the contested ball. Some undisciplined play meant that the Pies missed out on some good goal opportunities, only kicking 6 points. The Pies still down by 21. After half-time, the Pies dominated. Statistically, they won everywhere except on the scoreboard, courtesy of Sullivan, Long and Smith, who dominated the stoppages around the ground. In fact, the Pies should have been in front going into the final term. However, they were 3 points in arrears. It took until the 9-minute mark of the final quarter for the Pies to take the lead, thanks to a Mahoney goal. It was soon followed up by a goal to Demeter, who played well in the forward line to virtually ice the game and end our 5 losing streak. The Pies winning by 12 points. The final scores 9-14-68 to 8-8-56. As I mentioned, this was a complete domination after quarter time by the Pies, everywhere except the goals. Quicker ball movement and the controlling of the stoppages meant that the Pies got a lot of the ball and a lot of territory. The Pies had 20 more inside 50s. Our best Long was probably the best on the ground with 33 disposals, quickly followed by Demeter, Ryan and TJ. Smith and Sullivan were really good. Our goal kickers, Laverty 2, Demeter 2, singles to Saxena, Mahoney, Brown, Phillips and McCarthy. Some highlights. Demeter's 2 goals were excellent. The play from Smith, Sully and Long was good. Smith's 15 game disposal was one of his better ones, if not his best. Draftee watch. West was astray with his goal kicking but managed 9 contested marks. Smith with his 15 disposals. Saxena was lively. Printable was serviceable. McCarthy and Puncher showed glimpses. Next week the Pies have a bye. Go Pies.
Thank you, Serge. Wonderful insight as always.
Yeah, I think I said 8-point margin, so apologies. It was 12 points that we got up by, but there's a few names here that needs to be mentioned, and Ilaru Smith becomes an interesting one. I think we're going to need to see a better string of games because he's obviously just had to assume the mantle there in the VFL more recently with Oscar Steen coming in and then going out. But he's one that I reckon don't put a line through alongside Harrison Coe in case Darcy Cameron does need a spell. Looking a bit underdone, but the obvious one we need to talk about is Ned Long. 33 disposals, 7 tackles, stack of contested possessions, played in the midfield. And so I do wonder, Nick, do we have to have a separate conversation across the bye in more detail about Ned Long coming onto the scene? Very, very good in the front half of last season, and then probably petered out towards the end of last year, comes into the side this season, gets moved to half forward, and now he's playing VFL again. Like, I just think that he could be in that best midfield mix alongside an Ed Allen and a Nick Dacos, and we need to see more of that in the back half of this year.
We saw enough evidence in a humming side last year that Ned Long is very capable of playing a strong role in the midfield, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be doing that again. I get, look, if it's a week or two that Fly wants to try him at half forward or as a defensive forward, then, you can't fault him for trying to move him around at times. But A, it wasn't necessary, and B, he's prolonged it to a point where we've had poor Ned Long playing in the reserves and then showing us why he should be back in the seniors playing as that inside midfielder we've come to know. So, yeah, look, I think he needs to be back into this team sooner rather than later, playing this role. But I just can't understand what the thinking is.
But for who? That's the question that I raise. Yes, he's not in the side at the moment. He goes back. I just feel like you can get so jumpy with blokes who go back to the twos and dominate. But
I agree, but this is an exception, I think.
But the problem we had, though, was fitting him into this team, which is why he ended up, playing at half forward and not being able to have an impact. So who does he come in for is the question, because for mine, do not put Ned Long in this team unless he is playing the same midfield minutes that he was in season 2025. There's no point having him, out on a wing or running around at a half forward line just because he's accumulating the footy in the VFL. He's had an outstanding game from all reports. However, don't put him in there unless he's getting his chance in the middle and getting a fair, proper crack at it.
I think there's scope to put him back and still have him play in the role. Who it is, I mean, there's a couple of names where you might need to shift around. I think Lipinski is the first one that comes to mind, where you can then allow a Dacos to play on the wing and you can allow Houston to play at half back and maybe shift some magnets there. In saying that, and you do make some good points there, Jack, I think with the injury to Braden Maynard and the potential suspension to Billy Frampton, it does toss a few things up as to what that does look like, and maybe that does mean that Ned misses out in the short term, but it has to be short term. Ned Long is in that bracket of players aged 21 to 25 that need to be playing consistent football in order for this transition to be as seamless as possible.
And what it does do as well, it puts, for that reason of where his position on the ground is, it puts pressure on Ed Allen as well to keep performing. He's got his chance now. That's now your position to lose, because we have a bloke in the twos who's ready to come in, who's tried and tested, who can play your role. So competition for spots, it can be a really important thing to have at times. And I think at the moment we've got that between those two players.
Yeah, and just again, another VFL player up until this point in his career that is implicated in potentially what happens against the Port Adelaide Power. Joel Cochran is a really interesting name for mine, because Noah Howes is still 4 to 5 weeks away. We copped a shoulder injury, I believe, last week or maybe the week before. And now with Bruzzy and Bill Frampton out of the side, Nico, I mean, who are the other tall stocks to come into this team that are playing defence in the VFL? Is it too Jath?
There's not many. I mean, the two that stick to me at the moment is Jacob Ryan and maybe this Liam Puncher that we've brought in from the mid-season draft.
Puncher's a name that could debut as well. Yeah,
I mean, we might have to pull the trigger and play one of those at some point. I expect Will Parker not to be too far away from coming back into this team out of pure necessity either. So, yeah, it becomes a very interesting watch what this VFL side looks like. But it's buys across the board. The VFLW side also have the bye next week, and that's after they demolished Casey by 66 points. So they played at the KGM Centre over the weekend, so they got the home ground advantage still, and it worked for them getting that victory, and that means that they're in a really comfortable position on top of the ladder. They've got a percentage of 340 after 4 games. That's always a lovely sight to see. But a bye for the VFLW girls next week. Whew. All right, did we let it all out, fellas? Are we feeling all right?
I've got one more thing I need
Go on.
to get off my chest. Look, reports coming through in the last 24 hours that Collingwood's really putting the acid on Bobby Hill to show up and consistently. So it's all reported, and sometimes it's often hearsay, but this is another one that I think, just for the conscience of the team and knowing what the hell is going on for us as fans, it's just it doesn't help when things are compounding, and this has obviously been an issue, and I feel like the club's been very supportive. It's been very desired to see Bobby return in his health and well-being, and then as an athlete. But I'm just at the point now as a fan, I'm getting sick of it, to be honest with you. I think the final straw is very close, if not has arrived. And now that the baby's been born and Bobby's had his time away from the club.
Was back at training during the week.
Correct. I'm just curious to get your boys' thoughts if you're as impatient as I am.
I think I'm getting there now. I think we're, over the hill of,
good pun.
Oh,
mate.
so
Well
I
done.
actually didn't.
I know you didn't.
Didn't mean that. God, that's how well I'm going. But I think we are over the hill in the terms of, I'm sick of doing this merry-go-round. I'm sick of Bobby comes back in, we all wrap our arms around him and then, he's out for unexplained reasons. And as a fan, I'm sure there's people in the four walls who are far more across it than we are. But as a fan, that is incredibly frustrating, especially because we know the calibre of player that Bobby Hill is, or maybe what he once was, and doubt that he can ever probably return to the greatness that we saw, only 2 or 3 years ago. So it's just incredibly frustrating. I'm echoing Marcus's sentiments now about I'm just so over this merry-go-round that we're on with him at the moment. And if we even are at a point now where this is his last chance back at training, as you said, Nico, to make one last run at it. But I almost think I'm getting to the point now. It's almost best for Bobby, for the Collingwood Footy Club, if they just cut ties, shake hands, still support him in any means possible away from the game to make sure that he's doing right by himself and by his friends and family. However, the aspect and the slight carrot that we've all been dangled over our heads, Bobby Hill included, of him coming back to play AFL Footy Club and AFL Footy in the black and white stripes, that's got to be cut. And I think we move on and maybe potentially for him personally, he can get nabbed up by another club and have an impact elsewhere, probably at Geelong, because they've got a track record of doing amazing things with similar type players. So incredibly frustrating, but again, don't really know what's going on, but probably time to cut ties now, Nico.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get some clarity just to put it to bed. I've treated personally as a fan the fact that the last 12 months for me, he's just been on the long-term injury list, or he hasn't even been on the list, and he's just been that far away, removed from the group and what they're trying to do, that he just hasn't really entered my frame of mind until I've seen him listed on the team sheet as selected in the senior side. The reality is, I think enough time has now passed, and it is still a very delicate situation because you don't know what the mental state of these footballers are. And in particular, Bobby's case, we know that has somewhat been publicised over the last 24 months. So you do have to be careful to speculate. At the same token, we talked about transitional phases. I think in order for the club to move on, we need to get a definitive answer in some way, shape or form of what Bobby Hill's future does look like at this football club. I get that he's under contract for the next couple of years, but if a decision isn't made soon, as you boys have both said, it's doing nobody any good that we are in this limbo of will he, won't he, over the next who knows how long this could last. There is an indefinite amount of time that this could survive or go for, and that means that's only going to be detrimental the longer this goes. So, yeah, it's a fair point you make, Marcus. And look, the hope still is that we see him soon and that in a couple of months' time he's playing for us. But the reality is that's a long way from happening, and if it's going to stay a long way from happening, then, well, maybe that we need to start moving on.
And a point that I feel sometimes gets missed on that is how is it affecting his teammates?
Exactly.
How is it affecting the squad of players that are showing up week in, week out, doing all the right things, and then, this distraction comes along, they probably don't even know what's going on with
They
Bobby
wouldn't.
Hill, and then, even how to approach him as a person, how to approach the situation. It would be incredibly frustrating, it would be incredibly bewildering. So that's an element that I feel gets lost a little bit in all this. The mindset of the leadership group in all this, the mindset of the VFL group in all this, who is probably the most affected at the moment with his coming in, coming out. So I can imagine there's a fair bit of angst around the playing group regarding this situation, Nico.
Just final word there. I mean, sometimes the best thing a footy club can do is bring about change, and sometimes that's subtle in terms of changing the strategy around the playing group and the list management. Sometimes it's the coach, sometimes it's the footy department, and I feel like we're getting to a point in this club's history where we're in the end of a cycle, and Craig Kelly's apparently going to be making an exit from the club at the end of this season too. And I just think sometimes fresh faces around the place are needed. And Scotty Pendlebury, I hope he's not one of them that departs, but there are some other figures around the club administratively and on the track that I reckon, might benefit from a fresh start. So, it sucks to have to say it, but it just feels that way at the moment off the back of this loss.
Another watch amongst many. All right, gents, I think that's everything. I think we got it all out.
How much are you charging for tonight's session, Nick? That was a good therapy session.
No. I think we get one of these a year, and I think this was the week to do it, considering everything and considering we have the bye coming up, and it might give us a chance to reset. So enjoy the non-Collingwood weekend, Marcus and Jack.
Thank you, Nico. I always will miss the footy, but I think we need this as Collingwood supporters this week. Just a nice little pause in 2026. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we can come back and we can go on a run at the back half of this year, Marcus.
It's a far cry from this time 12 months ago. We're just winning every single week. Amazing how much things can change in a year, Jack. But Nico, been good to do it nonetheless.
Until next week, I've been Nicholas Sacco. You've been listening to or watching the Pies Nation podcast, where the pies are hot and the drinks are cold. We are thrilled to have the North Texas Devils sponsoring the Pies Nation podcast once again for season 2026, just in time to celebrate their 5th anniversary as a club. They are one of the best clubs to compete in the USAFL and are still on the lookout for new talent for both their male and female programs in the lead up to the new season. Their aim is to have 2 male teams and a female side compete in the Nationals in Florida later this year. They've got a new coach in Brendan Silva, and their main man, Peter Wood, is a passionate Pies man, and it's why it's great to have their support across the campaign. To learn more about the club or register your interest as a player, click the links in our YouTube bio or podcast description and join the Devils today.